Our following speaker has over 30 years of experience in the field of cybersecurity and information security. He has held many key leadership roles as an executive board member and advisor at some of the most innovative and disruptive technology startups in the field. He'll be speaking about self-driving SOC. Should we speed up or slow down? Please welcome Damian Miller, CSO, SIRP. Thank you.
All right, good morning, and thank you for having me here. This is my first time to the region, and I have met some of the smartest people in the last few days than I probably have in the last several years, so thank you again. Today, I get to talk about a few of my favorite subjects and my journey trying to build the world's first fully autonomous security operations platform starting back in 2016. So you can imagine back in 2016, AI was just sort of coming out of its shell. Some of the models were fairly new. We still had the same problem with millions of incidents, events to manage in the Security Operations Center. And it was a bold vision, a big one, and we went fast, really, really fast, to try and build it. So my background and how I got interested in security as a young person, I, like a lot of people, love video games. And I used to spend a lot of hours playing on my Atari systems, and I had an uncle that worked at Atari. And my dad bought me a newer version of Atari that had a modem. And I didn't know quite what a modem was, but as soon as I read the instructions and figured it out, and I could dial into these systems that had data that you could download, although extremely slow. And it was amazing. And that got me hooked, and I started getting these bulletin boards where you could download all kinds of numbers, and it was the early stages of really hacking into systems to try and find what you could find and share it. And I was hooked from then on. So how did it all begin when I started my journey to try and build the fully autonomous security operations? So I was very fortunate in about 2015 to get invited to a private event in the early stages of beta testing of what is now the full self-driving system in Tesla. This was probably release 1 back in the day of 2015-16. And we got to go to this course, and you sit in this car and you got to drive it around a controlled environment. And they had these different objects and different things to navigate around. And it was amazing. You could go too far to the left, and the system would warn you and tell you to input into the steering, or you could turn on the feature and the car would start to drift you back to where it needed to be in the center. If you went a little too fast and got close to the car in front of you or an object, it would warn you and then tell you to slow down, or it would apply, if you enabled the feature, or the guy who's helping you pilot the car would turn it on, and it would apply regenerative braking. And I thought, wow, this is unbelievable that a car can actually do these things. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I thought, what if we could apply this to security? Our daily lives are highly instrumented. We have a lot to do, a ton of manual tasks. What if we could figure out what was the way forward for us to instrument some of that, to automate it, to be able to have a self-driving system that would free us up to focus on lesser of the mundane activities just to figure out what's happening, into, okay, now I gotta look and find where the bad guys are coming before they're coming in. And that's a very hard thing to do, and especially back in 2016. So here's how we kind of began. This is a typical image of what security operations does. Many of you in this room are responsible for these functions. This is a hard job. It doesn't get the glamour of like a hard job like a brain surgeon or someone like this that you see on TV. They make a lot of shows about. We're just getting into some cybersecurity shows. They're a bit funny. We're responsible for a lot. We have to defend the brand. We have to keep the websites up. We have to keep the users out of their own way. There is just a ton to do. So we thought, hey, why don't we just throw AI in the middle and we'll just build this system. So we started collaborating with TensorFlow in the early days. That's an interesting story in itself, but it was functioning to do a few things. And we went fast forward and let's slam some automation in there and fuse it together. And then let's bring in all the data that we ever wanted in a security sense, whether that's contextual data, all these sources we couldn't get, and let's do all of this in 5 years. So the whole idea was to build this system that would run autonomously and have these defensive capabilities, much like the self-driving car. It encounters some bad data, bad actors, and it's bumpering that and keeping you on the lane where you need to be. That is like climbing the largest mountains that there are in existence. So automation itself was very early, very Python-based, very manual, still not a lot going on like you see today with some low-code, no-code features. So it was a peak in just itself. Bring in all the data, which at the time was already very large and coming at you very fast, and we were still figuring out what to do. Are we cloud? Are we cloud native? What's happening? Are we going to keep the data on-prem? CISOs were still wrestling with this idea. AI, as I mentioned, was in its early stages. That alone is another peak to climb. So I feel like the journey was simultaneously trying to climb 3 enormous mountains all at once. And it is a lot to do. It's very hard. And as I mentioned, we went very fast to do this. If you'll notice, by looking at these mountains, you don't see any flags on the top, which is the typical thing you see when people climb mountains. They're successful. The team goes up there. They put these terrific flags. So I'd like to say even at the summit maybe we got there, which is where you kind of see the jagged lines around the snow caps. Best case scenario, I honestly could say we got to maybe above base camp, because this is an incredibly hard undertaking. And this was a few years, about 4 years worth of effort, about 2020. So fast forward just another year, security operations, we didn't really realize the full autonomous vision. But what we're still looking at is the challenges of data, AI, and automation. And just a few short years ago, we weren't fully adopted yet on how to approach automation. We're using a lot of manual code work still, trying to maintain that and keep it going. AI is still sort of ancillary outside the SOC, and we're still kind of figuring that out. And now the data is growing. So we still kind of have the same problem set 4 years into endeavoring in this giant climb. And if you look at what's happened between just 21 and 23, you could insert your COVID joke here, but this is what happened. Click forward, there we go. In the last 2 years alone, 90% of the world's data was generated. That is an unbelievable number. I never in my lifetime thought we'd get past, a terabyte. Then people started talking about petabytes. And now we're talking about zettabytes and beyond. What's beyond that? And the projection between 21 and 23, that massive volume of data, and where we're headed between now and even 2 years forward, it's projected to double again. So all the problems that we saw before, and AI along the way has now shifted really fast into what was everyone hyping the next big thing. And as I mentioned, we started in the TensorFlow, a lot of collaboration with the Google team, fantastic, really smart people. These are really hard problems to solve, especially when it comes to information security. So automation also shifted at the same time. Just in this year, you're now hearing automation is no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. You simply cannot scale your team, deal with all of this data, simultaneously explore AI, and take on all of these challenges that still exist inside of the Security Operations Center. We're responsible for a ton, and it just doesn't slow down. And so I feel like my journey of getting very frustrated and thinking AI is the solution, let's plug it in. And we tried really hard for 4 years to do that, and it ultimately just became too much of a challenge. I'm actually very encouraged about what I see today because now I feel like things are actually working. That learning takes a long time. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of courage. There's just a ton to do. So we're still have a little bit of AI going on as you hear this. A lot of products, you know, they have AI in this, AI in that. There's an announcement every day. There's a lot of fear around self-awareness. The machines are rising up, whatever. It's extremely important to have this as part of your ecosystem, but I'll have some comments about what I would recommend in just a few moments. So here's our other problem. We're just exploring AI internally. The bad guys have moved externally, and now they are using it to amplify all of the noise that was coming at us before. So now we're seeing things like worm GPT, fraud GPT, and that's just further compounding the problem. So I'm not an AI expert by trade. I'm sure there's plenty of smart people in this room that are way smarter than I am. But really what I feel like, AI is early when it's learning security. It's still trying to figure out how we can train it with the data we have. Do we have the right context? Do we have the right data? Is this the right whatever? It's very hard to get these models to make those smart decisions on our behest. So I thought as a fun experiment, I would take a few of my favorite little rootkit and toolkit items that I have to explore a few things like, how could I get a model to tell me what to do with a phishing email? Could it recognize it? So I know this is a crude example because it's not reality, but it kind of illustrates the fact that I plugged in this information to take a phishing email that I had, a known phishing email associated to a domain, and I asked, not to pick on the ChatGPT guys, but what should I do about this? And what would DALL-E think visually this meant? I ended up with this goofball picture of random text and imagery that said, you should do this. And I went, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I did the same thing with drive-by compromise category. And I said, well, let's take a couple of domains that we know. They're infected, they have some malware. Let's see if we could kind of get in there, look at the traffic, see what would happen, and what would it recommend that I do about it. The same thing happened. We kind of got some very close gibberish text, but then this guy popped up. And it said, hey, I'm drive-by compromise. And I said, okay, well, for a bad actor, you look pretty happy, so he must be winning. And this sort of illustrates that I feel like we still are in the early stages. It's incredibly important, but to me, it's a labor of love and caring that has to go into it. You have to really empower your team to understand the data that they work with every day. They're extremely smart, and getting the process down and being able to train those models. And if you need outside expertise, there's always this notion sometimes in security, we can do it all. Sometimes you have to take a pause and say, you can't do it all. You need someone extremely smart. I think it was Henry Ford who said, I don't need to know how to do it. I just need to know who are the smartest people at doing it. And I think that's very resonant when it comes to solving some of these problems. So this is a philosophical question. Should we slow up? Should we speed up or slow down? I don't have all of the answers. I can just tell you that from my journey going really fast, I think we missed a lot of opportunity along the way. Slowing down, if you go too slow, you're probably going to miss the boat, as they say. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of tools out there to leverage, a lot of models and information to explore. Collaboration, I think, has to be the key to that. So, what do? We still have these same challenges. They're not going away. We're responsible for all of these aspects of the SOC. And if you took this same picture and expanded it probably to everyone in this room, they would probably add 10 or 8 more boxes to what they do every day. It's not as simplistic as, we're responsible for alert management, or these guys handle incident response, or these guys are doing security intelligence. So there's a lot of complexity here. But what I would recommend, based on both my experience in the space, is that slowing down a little to address automation, which is one of my favorite topics, is incredibly important. I'm not saying the whole ecosystem should be anchored with automation. What I'm saying is you have to focus on automation as a core principle to the various processes that go on. You won't get them all, but there are certain things that what you're doing is looking at opportunity cost. You're trying to buy back team for your team's time so that they can focus on those higher priority things, the things that are really important, that are coming at you from every direction. And data. We have to be able to leverage as much data as possible, whether that's in lake, it's cloud, it's prem, it's contextual, it comes from threat intelligence. That's the key, in my opinion, to unlocking what we need to do next. I can't begin to tell you how many times we've gone through the tier 1, tier 2, 3 analyst swing of saying, hey, I've got something here. They kick it up the stack. The guys look at it, gals, they say, no, you don't. They kick it right back downstream. Go back and get this. Go back and find this data. So it feels like we're always stuck. These guys are excited to do their work. They want to move it forward. They can't. It comes back down. So adding AI to the mixture, I think, is the key, as I thought the same thing back in 2016, to unlocking where we need to go. It's the only way we're going to be able to logically defend against what's coming. It's already here. We've got these guys. They're very smart, as you heard from the previous speakers. They are sharp, and they have figured out ways to find companies' insurance policies for their cyber insurance. That's just crazy. And now they have a number to work with. So they know they've got you when they need to negotiate. So when I say be methodical when it comes to AI, what I mean is, if you can take one of these problems and you can apply AI to just one, let's say it's compliance, you can fuse a little automation in there, you can automate some of that process, you can make sure you have all the data that helps you meet that compliance quickly. That's going to help the model learn what to do and make those smart decisions. And you can take those lessons learned, that anchor, and begin to move that towards these other features that the SOC always contends with. That sounds slow, but if done correctly, you can move at a pretty good cadence to get through these different exercises, take the lessons learned, help these other teams move forward. Thank you.